Hi, welcome to our inaugural Chicago Asthma Consortium podcast called Inhale Life Asthma Conversations from the Chicago Asthma Consortium. My name is Sharmili Nienhuis, and I'm an allergy asthma physician at the University of Chicago and host of this podcast. I am so excited to have our first guest, who is a dear friend of mine and colleague, Dr. Andrea Papalardo. And today we're going to be talking not necessarily specifically focused on, what are the asthma guidelines or anything, but we really wanted to raise some awareness to asthma research. And as Dr. Papalardo will tell you, she's not only a clinician where she sees patients, but she's also a researcher. So first off, I just wanted, Andrea, if you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit about yourself and also why did you become an allergy asthma doctor?
Yes, so I'm Andrea, and I am both a pediatrician, a child doctor, and an adult doctor, which is called an internist. And I loved my combined training. It was amazing. But my whole life, I've navigated having family members and others with diseases that started in childhood and last their whole life. And that to me was something that was really important for whatever I decided. I have asthma, I have allergies. My daughter does too. But even before I had my daughter, I knew that I can take care of an entire family who has all similar issues that are related to allergy or their asthma for their whole life. And that's really what I found so beautiful. And I can only focus on those things because it takes a lot of time and energy to improve someone's asthma if it's severe enough and or their food allergies.
Great. As I alluded to a little bit ago, I also mentioned that you're, in addition to being a wonderful clinician for allergies and asthma, you're also a researcher. So, how did you become interested in doing research in asthma?
Now, this is a great question. So I always had this inquisitive, creative mind where I wanted to know more on how to fix problems. And that comes across when I take care of my patients. We create a plan together and we say, okay, what's going on? Oh, wow, that's a lot. Let's dissect it. Let's get an answer. Let's get a plan and let's go forth. But what I realized is so many of my patients had all these things going on that were outside of their control. They couldn't fix the policy that was impacting them. They couldn't fix the air that they breathe. They couldn't fix the workplace environment or the school environment that had a lot of different triggers for whatever their allergic disease was. And I knew that I needed to do something bigger. And I was in private practice for a few years. And I started getting more involved in the research world because I wanted to see if we can impact policy and do things like care coordination and working within schools to help improve how asthma is managed there. And that's the type of asthma research I do. And a lot of other people do different types of asthma research, like clinical trials, saying, hey, this is a really cool new drug for asthma. We have plenty really beautiful drugs that are not only out, but are coming down the pike. And a lot of research goes into that. You have to make sure things are safe. You want to test them first. And then once they're safe, then we want to say, okay, is it working? If it's working, how much do we need to give? And then we want to be able to give it and see if that works in the real world and who's getting it and who's not, and making sure it's equitably allowed to get. And so whether it be insurance, et cetera. And those are issues that we can navigate with research. And I love working within the community, and I like to make things change that for the better with community involved. And that's the type of work I do.
Okay, great. And I know you talked just a little bit about how, there are different kinds of research and how research can be, studying a drug to studying research policy or to studying policies that are implemented in school setting and the communities. But, as a patient that may be listening to this that has asthma or allergies, like, what does research do for them? I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a great question. Well, it's important to know that things like when you go into a public location and you see a box with the emergency heart monitor that can give you a shock, when you're having a heart attack out wherever you're at, those things all came about by research that said, hey, if we give somebody CPR, we push on their chest and we give them an electric shock that you see on TV everywhere, those things can save your life. Similarly, you might have a medical problem like cancer. And when you have cancer, you want to get the best drugs that are out there to make this cancer go away, put you in remission, and live the life that you were meant to live. But if we don't do research to figure out what new drugs can work against the cancer that you have as new cancers are coming about, how are we going to be able to provide care for somebody? Then what's causing the cancer in the first place? And how can we cure that cancer? How can we cure asthma? A lot of that goes into the environment. Well, there's problems in the environment. How do we get those fixed? Through research. We say, hey, there's something there. All of these things, from the air that we breathe to the things that we have happening in our body to how we can treat them, all come about by looking into what works and what doesn't. And if we don't know, we're just blindly going with a disease with perhaps not so much in our tool shed to be able to give you when you're sick. And
Yeah.
that's scary because we're one of the best countries for innovation and saying, hey, we got all this research. And there's a reason why people look to us for being the best and the brightest in creation of new drugs and development and all of these things. And it impacts us every day and every time there's something that happens. And even if there's nothing happening right now, the air that we breathe can impact us later in our health.
Great. Now, again, I know you have your own research program, but we talk about research, but I just wanted to get a better understanding for others too, is, where does the money come from
Yeah.
for you to do that research? Like, is it something you go out and, try to convince people to give you money, or how does that work? Or does it come from your institution? I think it would be really helpful to
Yeah.
understand where the money comes to do that all the great research that you're doing.
This is a very important question because so many people that do really cool things like cameras on a plane, they're going to get all this money from the really rich private corporations, right? Or a pharmaceutical company could create something, but we want things that make sense to treat everybody in an unbiased way. We don't, and a lot of the things that we do to treat people and to figure out what works or doesn't might not necessarily make a lot of money. So you have to create an idea, say, hey, I seeing this in my patients, I think this could work, right? Or we need a type of program that helps this medication that may work get to more people. We think of an idea. Then it's years of creating teams that say, hey, we are similar, we are similar ideas of what we want, but we have different skills to build a program that will help shape that idea into a reality. For example, I started off several years ago talking with Chicago Public Schools and all of the people in the state of Illinois saying, hey, in 2016, we think that having an inhaler back up in schools is important. So starting in 2016, we're having this conversation. We have advocacy, we have discussions throughout the state. Lawmakers pass a law in 2018 and says that it's okay. Fast forward, we didn't get these into schools in the majority of the public schools until 2023 to 2024. So it takes a very long time. How did that happen? I have to write to people, 100 pages of documents saying, I have all these really great people. They're really into this. We can do this. We can prove that it works. Okay, well, we don't know if it's going to work. All right, I'll give you a little bit of money to see if it proves it works. Okay, I think this is proof, but that's not enough proof. So then you have to give a whole nother 100-page document to say, can this work? Oh, no, it doesn't. You have to change X, Y, and Z. Now, it took that many years for just something very simple as having a backup inhaler in schools for kids that don't have them because they're not diagnosed or they forgot them to be put in place. All of that work takes a significant amount of resources from multiple people to get done and multiple sources of money because smaller organizations like American Lung, they only have a small pot of money. The government helps support this, that helps our United States citizens have a better access to the medications and the programs that they deserve for whatever their problem is. So if you don't have a huge corporation that's able to fund your idea because it may not be as sexy as others, you go to the government who helps support the institution that you're in so that you can do that work. And when you get paid to do that work, it's only for the things that you're physically doing and not for that space to do the research. And that's what those indirects are. We hear about this in the news. Indirects are not necessary. They are if you have anyone that is doing any kind of research on a daily basis. Because if I don't have a space to do that research, it's not going to happen. And
And
people lose.
just, yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think just a couple points I wanted to add because I'm a researcher as well, but as you were talking about, getting treatments to people, these innovative treatments, and just so people know, it takes about, there's this about approximately 17-year lag from, oh, we identified a potential drug to actually it being FDA approved. And so there's a lot of different types of research that have to happen. First, they have to see, is it okay, safe in animals? Is it safe in humans that don't have a disease? Okay, how does the body metabolize, the drug, let's say, for example? Okay, now if we are in a very controlled setting, okay, how does it perform against either usual care or some placebo drug? And then we also then want to see, okay, not only does it work in 18 to 54 year olds, does it work in a more broader range population? Does it work in a diverse population? So all of that again takes about usually 17 years from, starting to identify, a potential drug, for example, or a treatment, to it actually getting implemented in our healthcare system. So just knowing that period of time requires a lot of research funding. And I think the other thing, and I'd love you to comment on it too, is you brought up that, yeah, you could get private funders like pharmaceutical companies or other, corporations to fund research. But I think, the concern there is that people have interests in those companies, so then the research may be biased essentially. So
Yeah,
maybe, yeah, go
you
ahead.
have to check on those things. You can't let a corporation treat us as humans. You need that human touch, and the researchers are medical doctors, they're PhDs who dedicated their life to ensuring that we can improve the health of others. That is my goal. Now, I might do it differently than Sharmili does it, than another researcher who might work in a lab, but that is my goal. I don't have commercial interest in whatever pharmaceutical company that it might be doing something to create a drug. And it's not against them. They create beautiful drugs, but they need to have unbiased people double checking to make sure that they're not pushing forward things that could be hurtful to us in the future. And there's been examples of this, like thalidomide in pregnancy causing problems with babies coming with severe defects. We need to make sure that research stays in place to protect us. And if that falls apart, if we can't do that, then we are not as healthy as a country. And we've also reduced our ability to produce that research and innovation that allow us that backup. If we're sick and there's nothing for us, we can go to that clinical trial and we can get that drug and maybe save our family member's life. Maybe we can get that drug that's coming down the pike if we just hold on for a year. And these are the situations where my patients are in all the time. But if we don't have those checks and balances, then we're going to allow business to make decisions on our lives and our bodies. And that is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that as a big problem, especially, some people that have more rare diseases. They're not gonna maybe make as much money because it's not gonna go to a large population, but we still want to have treatments for those diseases or know, what are the best options. And if we kind of leave it to corporations, they're not gonna see that they don't have that end goal that you have, that you said, that you want to improve the life of your patients. It's not always that because they always have shareholders, board members to respond to. That as a independent investigator, that what you're doing, you're responding to more of your values, and not there's not a monetary amount that you're
No.
really focused on. So yeah, yeah. So you briefly mentioned too that that a lot of people are talking about research cuts, particularly to NIH and specifically indirect costs, which are the costs that the universities often bear, or it could be not only universities but other institutions. A lot of research is also done even in private practices. And so there has to be, some, there is a cost to doing, a business and add an additional business in a space. So, how might these cuts to research really impact, patients and their families with asthma or other chronic diseases?
Well, when budgets have been made and there's an expectation for funds that don't come in, then it brings research to a screeching halt. And we're kind of seeing that happening. The opportunities to write grants have been reduced, the money to get back from the grants are reduced. So when I write a grant and say, hey, this is what it's going to take, the financial amount for the program. I need someone to call people. I need to give people money for their time and compensate them. I need to buy Zoom. I need to buy this, that, whatever things you need to buy. That's what I put in. But then there's those other funds that say, who's going to pay for Dr. P's office? Who's going to pay for Dr. P's assistant's office and the phone call and the email, whatever. Those things are paid by for the university. The university would much rather have me, if they didn't have those funds, seeing more patients. But if I don't do research too, that it doesn't get to all of those things the patients can't control that we need help with as human beings, that's where research comes in. But if you don't have the space and time available for me to do those things, then the research cannot go on. And I really fear the public universities, the safety net hospitals that are doing a lot of the bulk of this work, where we're like, hey, we need to get these things to the people that need them the most. Research needs to be done. If there's no infrastructure, then the research enterprise is going to dissolve. And that means that the research won't get done that needs to get done to bring that 17-year gap to a much shorter amount of time when we know something works and it's not getting to the people who need it.
And so what can, people listening to this podcast, maybe what can they do to ensure that, asthma research continues and it doesn't come to a screeching halt and then it becomes 25 or 30 years, in order to get new treatments?
What I want to emphasize to everyone is we all have a voice, and that voice can be utilized in many ways. One is through being aware, knowing that no, we're not scamming people. This money is being well used for things that are important for our lives and in many different disease states, but especially in asthma and allergies. The second is to, do your research, look it up, see like, what does this mean? And what does this mean to you as a person? And once you can realize what that means, and perhaps you've been in a clinical trial before, perhaps you've benefited from an asthma drug like a biologic that required many, many decades of research to even be created into a molecule that might even be available, then you can speak to your representative. You have many representatives. You have a senator, you have a House of Representative person, Congress people that you can talk to. There are petitions online that are ready. They put in the words for you, but you can say your own personal experience. You can talk to the CAC and say, hey, what are some possibilities of me giving a testimonial? Say, hey, I have bad asthma. I benefited from research from this way, Um, we've all benefited, we but just might not know. And I, for one, although I am a researcher, I've also benefited from research. And so these are the things that you you have to understand your power. We all have power. And if we are constituents of a policy person, we can speak to them and just say, hey, I don't think this is fair. What's going to happen to my public university? What's going to happen to the hospital that I go to? What's going to happen to my ability if I, or God forbid, had severe asthma and I needed a medication and it wasn't available? What's going to happen then? That fear of the unknown is huge, but the known cutting of research is going to reduce research. It is. And so if we can keep that from happening, and continue on. Now, not everything is perfect. Can we make a better system that works for people even less than 17 years and maybe speed up and make it more efficient? Of course, of course. But looking at that with more of a fine-tooth comb instead of an axe might be a better approach.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you raise a lot of good points is that, I think the kind of summary is that everybody has a voice. And I think, this is kind of one of our ways to try to get our voice out there so people know what the importance of asthma research and the importance of, how it really impacts like our patients. I know personally, I've been practicing for many years now. I won't say how many years, but I know the treatment options for asthma have changed significantly, and I've been able to see my patients, benefit directly from again these new asthma drugs and be able to, drastically change their life for the better. So because directly because of asthma research. I think the only other thing I would add to what you're saying is how to ensure that asthma research continues is also if so inclined participating in asthma research as Andrea said there's many different types of asthma research from those that are yes maybe we'll get blood samples or lung samples or nasal samples or by other biologic samples to those that are just doing focus groups where we're just asking you your lived experience with asthma. So I think definitely for Andrea and I know it's very important to incorporate the lived experience of a lot of our asthma patients on how on asthma treatment and incorporate it into our lives and in our practice, but also again, particularly of groups that usually don't have a voice, really including them in research.
I think it's really important because I tease people. They're like, "What kind of research do you do?" And I'm like, I talk to people because everyone that I talk to has a solution embedded in their lived experience, right? And so, how do I get my next idea? We're talking to each other, and then we can make our lives better collectively for asthma. But if I don't hear your voice, I don't know. And so I want to hear your voice. And being a part of this allows you to share that voice in your lived experience to make other people's lives better. Is it scary? Do they make you sign a consent? Of course, read that consent. Ask questions. I will go through it with you for as long as you need it. I did a focus group yesterday. It was amazing. And what I like about it is that at first everyone's kind of like, well, I don't know what to say. And then everyone's just chatting with each other and just, it's beautiful to see people understanding one another and their own experience based on what they've shared. And I think that we need to take a look at how research has been in the past and the continued healthcare system way that they've treated people inappropriately in a new light and say, how can we make this better for everyone? But we can't do that if we are not given the funds to be able to support it. But just know that doctors like Sharmili and I, that is our focus, is to make a system work and everyone be able to have access to what they need when they come in with asthma or food allergy or eczema, all of these things that we commonly have, one, the other, all of them, all of these things. That's how we make our lives better.
Well, I want to thank you, Andrea. Again, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. And again, I'm so excited that we're starting this podcast called Inhaled Life Asthma Conversations from the Chicago Asthma Consortium or the CAC. And I think we'll wrap things up and we'll please look out for our podcast that we're doing monthly and it'll be available on the Chicago Asthma Consortium website. Thank you.